Draft time is one of the most exciting times in an NHL season, since every fan is looking forward to who will be a part of the next generation of their team. Youth players from around the world are drafted into the NHL, but if you watch the draft, there are some groups of players which face some skepticism. This skepticism isn't directed at whether or not these players are any good, but rather if these specific players will choose to play for the teams that draft them. This is most noticeable with players drafted from Russia, as teams are pretty wary of drafting Russian talents with the fear that there is a possibility that the player could want to stay in Russia and then play in the KHL. And another group of prospects that warrant some concern over their future with the team is college players who come from the NCAA. Usually, with North American draft prospects, once a player is drafted to a team, that team retains their rights for 2 years after the draft. If the player is unsigned after those 2 years, they re-enter the draft as long as they are 20 years old or younger at the time of the draft. If these North American players are over 20 and unsigned, then they become unrestricted free agents. This means they can sign with whatever team they want. This applies to every type of North American prospect except those players that will attend or are currently attending an NCAA program. Instead, for NCAA players, the NHL teams that draft them retain their rights for the entirety of their time in college plus 30 days after they leave college. After these 30 days, the NCAA player can sign with any team they'd like, including the original team that drafted them. We've seen NCAA players draw out this process before in order to go to a more desirable team, and it's something that's happened not too long ago either. That's why a lot of people are wary of drafting NCAA players, since they have more control than a normal North American junior hockey player. And as you could probably imagine, some teams might prefer to have as much control over a situation as possible. Now, this isn't to say that all NCAA players won't sign for the team that drafted them. Most players would be ecstatic to sign for the team that picked them. This is just a one-off situation that has a possibility of happening. So does the team that loses their NCAA talent to another team actually get anything in return for compensation? Well, the answer is it depends. A team will only get something in return if that player was drafted in the first round of the NHL entry draft. The return would be compensation in the form of a second round pick, much like what I discussed in the Cherepanov rule video, which I'll link down below. And this compensation rule isn't even fully guaranteed. The NHL reviews each case separately, so it's not even a 100% guarantee that a pick will be given, but more of like a 99.9% chance that the team will get a pick. If a player gets picked in any round other than the first, then no compensation is given for them leaving. Now, some extra notes on NCAA players. They're not only North Americans. In today's game, a good portion of NCAA players come from Europe, since the NCAA is a good way to get noticed by the NHL and get a great education for your future. And unlike other NCAA sports programs, NCAA hockey allows players to enter the draft without losing their NCAA rights. What I mean is that in the NFL and NBA, for example, once an NCAA player commits to getting drafted, there's no looking back. And you have to be really sure that you're going to get drafted, or you run the risk of not being able to play in the NCAA the next season. This isn't the case with hockey though, so there really is no negative to getting drafted. If anything, it lets you plan your future out a little better. So that more or less covers NCAA draft rights and why NHL teams might be wary of drafting these types of players. Regardless of that though, I personally think that going the NCAA route is one of the best things a hockey player can do. I hope you liked the video, and I'll see you in the next one.